It was an Indian tribe that needed a new chief. Now, the stated by the Indians is you don't use technology. You want to know about the weather, you look at the stars, you look at the moon, and you figure out what the winter is going to look like. So this Jew needed a job, so he hired himself out as an Indian chief. He had a darker complexion, and it worked. So they took him, and they asked him if he knows how to read the stars and predict the weather. He says, of course. They asked him, "No, what's the winter going to look like? We got to prepare." No, he knew about the pending winter like I know about the pending winter. So he says, it's going to be somewhat cold. He didn't know, so he sneaked out at night, and he called up the Weather Bureau in Washington, and he asked them. They said, it's going to be cold. So he comes back, and he says he looked up in the stars again, and he sees it's going to be cold. They got tents, it's going to be cold, and they started to collect a lot of wood to be able to warm their bones. The next week, he calls up the Bureau again, and they tell him it's going to be very cold. So he gives the report to the Indians. He saw again in the stars, it's going to be very cold. Now they're frantically collecting lumber, so they shouldn't freeze. Next week, he calls up, they tell him, and he comes back to them, he says it's going to be excruciatingly cold. It's going to be awfully cold. Now, men, women, children, 24 hours a day, they're gathering wood. The next week, he calls up, they tell him it's going to be the coldest winter in American history. He tells the guy, you're driving me crazy. Every week I call you and you change the forecast. First time, cold, very cold, awfully cold, the coldest winter. The guy says, listen, you think we know anything about the weather? He says, we know nothing about the weather. All we know is that this year the Indians are collecting wood like crazy, nonstop. That's how we predict our weather. So essentially, what the Balatanya here really is saying is, what the Maggid once said, it says in Pirkei Avos, Da mala maila mimach, right? Know what is above you. Da, you should know mala maila mimach. His Rebbe, the Maggid teached, Da, you should know mala maila mimach. Whatever is happening lamaila is all from you. Whatever is happening above is all from you. Never underestimate who you are. That little Jewish boy, right? He thought he's getting information from the Weather Bureau of Washington. They were getting all their information from him. He thought he was the ultimate makabel. He was the ultimate mashpia. He looked at himself as the ultimate ignorant recipient of data and information. And really, he was the source of all the data and information. So sometimes in life, you're looking at others as the masters and you as the slave, as the victim, when really it's the other way around. It's just a matter of perspective.